Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 3 of What If Deku Had Green Lightning. If you guys enjoyed this what if and want to see part 4 of it, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel. Before we start, please do support for more awesome content. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. Izuku woke up the night of the fateful Friday, his head in massive pain, and despite the nurse's help, the painkillers he had taken earlier had worn off. He knew this wouldn't last too long, and it could be far worse. He noted that he was still wearing the earmuffs, and the blindfold Bakugo had fitted him with earlier, but he wasn't complaining. If it weren't for that, he would probably be close to screaming. Eventually, the pain subsided slightly, and Izuku found himself drifting gently towards the realm of sleep. Izuku woke up again in the morning. It wasn't too early, nor was it too late, and he appreciated that. Looking over, he saw a cavalry girl preparing a few final tests and a small bag for him. After a few minutes of testing, she gave him the all clear, so long as he doesn't push himself too hard today, and handed him the bag. Painkillers, and some tablets specifically to help with migraines. The migraine may last a while longer, so take one of the tablets before you leave, the cavalry girl explained. Izuku nodded his thanks, and took one of the tablets. Half an hour later, Izuku was prepared to go home. The moment he reached, he was surrounded in a hug by his adoptive mother, who scolded him for being so reckless whilst also praising him for doing so well. Returning the hug and moving past her, he went to see his brother, who praised and showed concern for him in a uniquely Bakugo way. He chuckled to himself once his brother finished scolding him, as he went to his room to lie down. It was far nicer now the migraine was gone, and he caught up on some well-needed sleep. The weekend came and went with Izuku doing most of his studying and work on the second day. He did not want to incur the wrath of recovery girl for pushing himself too hard, and soon it was time for school again come Monday. There was a mob of press standing at the school gates, all eager to talk to students taught by the one and only All Might, along with news of the attack on the students. Izuku and Kocchan were quickly surrounded, but thankfully Kocchan, being Kocchan, very quickly warded the reporters off, as they continued on their way. Stepping into class, he was immediately surrounded by his classmates, all of whom were incredibly concerned. Although he was touched by the kind gesture, he became a nervous wreck very quickly, not able to answer a single question. Thankfully, Aizawa-sensei saved him from further questioning as the teacher walked in, giving the class the usual annoyed glare despite having the appearance of a mummy. Everyone scurried to their seats, not willing to invoke the wrath of their teacher. Once they were all seated, Aizawa-sensei started with an announcement. Today for homeroom will be some standard housekeeping. You will be choosing class president and vice president. I don't care how you do it, so long as it gets done. Aizawa-sensei finished off, before zipping himself up in his sleeping bag. Not a few seconds after Aizawa-sensei finished speaking, the classroom descended into complete and utter chaos. There was yelling, some students trying to pitch themselves as best candidate, mostly Mineta, and a table being thrown, courtesy of Bakugo. Everyone. This is an appalling manner to act in. Iida began, gathering the class's suggestion. Well, do you have any ideas on what to do? Izuku asked, encouraging his classmate to continue. We shall hold a democratic vote. Everyone has one vote, in which the person who has the most votes will be the president, and the runner-up the vice president. There was a quiet murmuring throughout the class as they considered the suggestion, and Yoyorozu handily provided a box up the front, and voting cards for each student. After much deliberation, Izuku had placed his voting card in the box. Both Yoyorozu and Iida were good contenders, with Yoyorozu being incredibly resourceful and Iida being a commanding presence. But in the end he figured that commanding presence and fixated alignment with the rules would be perfect qualities for a president, and there was no doubt that some of the other students would vote for the former. Four Eyes is too stuck up to effectively lead. Izuku is too nervous. There's no one else really, unless 3D printers resourceful and cooperative. Yeah. Once the last ballot had been cast, Iida pulled them out of the box, and created a tally of names and votes on the board. As he cast the final stroke of chalk, there was a clear winner of the votes. Iida Taniya, with 6 votes, became the class representative president, while Momo Yoyorozu, with 4 votes, became the vice president. Izuku was close with 3. He was so thankful he didn't get either position, whereas the rest of the class got 1, if they voted for themselves, or 0. My fellow classmates, I am ever so grateful for this opportunity to prove myself to you and our school. I will ensure to excel and be a worthy representative for the class that is 1A. I sincerely hope I can live up to your expectations, and I will strive to fulfill them best I can regardless. Thank you for this opportunity. Iida finished his speech with a perfect bow, before gesturing to his counterpart to do something similar. Well, thank you all for this opportunity to represent you, and I will strive to do my best. Yoyorozu ended her speech with a sincere smile, and was decidedly less intense than Iida, which was definitely a pleasant break for the class. Now that's out of the way, get out of the class and go to lunch, Aizawa-sensei told them, crawling away in his sleeping bag. The class watched in tense silence as he did so, before turning to each other to chat. By the time everyone started to go to the canteen, they found themselves trapped in the classroom, a large mob of students from 1B, 1C and others blocking the way. Hey, what gives? Kirishima was the first to call out, this ain't manly at all. Izuku was baffled as he watched the students blocking their exit. Out of the corner of his eye he saw Kak-chan becoming steadily more aggravated. This isn't going to end well for anyone involved, Izuku thought, as he moved into a far corner of the class, away from the rising storm. He heard Kak-chan's signature berating voice scream. You fucking exorcist move. Bakugo, that is no way to engage with other students at out. Iida tried to scold his classmate before being cut off. I don't give a fuck for eyes, I wanna go. Kak-chan responded, before suddenly collapsing. In the time he was yelling, Izuku had gone behind his brother and lightly zapped him, just enough to shut him up. I apologize for my friend's behavior, he's a tad too arrogant for his own good, Izuku said, bowing to the crowd as he held up his adoptive brother with one hand. Most of them seemed happy with this, and began to disperse having had seen what the famed one had to offer. Most of them. Yeah, well, it seems the Hero Course kids are still just arrogant. Consider this a declaration of war, a purple-haired boy spoke up, sporting a piercing glare. With that he, and the remainder of the crowd, dispersed allowing the Hero Course students of wanted to go to lunch. The class just looked at each, shrugged, and went on with their day. Thankfully Kak-chan had come back around, so Izuku no longer had to hold on to his brother, who was giving a loving death glare. As everyone was in the cafeteria and began heading back to class, a screeching alarm announcing a security breach. Very quickly the students of Class 1 found themselves pressed shoulder to shoulder and being jostled as students from every department were trying to force their way out. This is unbecoming of such a prestigious school's students. What even is the bother? Tani thought as he was pressed up against the window. He saw people with cameras and microphones, and a few people his quirks made their appendages exactly that. Ah, it is just the press and some reporters. Everyone calm down. This is unbecoming of UA's students, and there is nothing to fear except the press. Tani yelled, to no avail. Few students heard him over the ruckus, and those that did were faring no better. Looking around, he saw Uraraka, and quickly called out to her to use her quirk on him. The anti-gravity girl managed to briefly tap Iida on the shoulder with all 5 fingers of her right hand, enough for Iida to slowly start to float. This successfully brought the attention of some students directly near him, but he needed more. Think Tania, what would Tensei do? Aha. Tania came to a conclusion. Thinking quickly, he activated his engines, causing him to fly in circles. Right, no gravity. But it's working. He thought until he eventually managed to crash into the top of the door frame. This successfully got the students' attention. Everyone calm down. It is just the press outside. Tania began, continue out in a calm and orderly fashion, to the evacuation point. With those words, students began to slowly but more calmly file out of the halls, and Uraraka released her quirk from Tania. Thankfully Izuku was there to help catch the engine-legged boy, and together the trio made their way out to the rest of their class. Aizawa sighed as he led his class back to their homeroom. The interruption, courtesy of the press, has finally been dealt with. Alright, so one more announcement I forgot to make earlier. UA holds a yearly sports festival, which is Japan's replacement for the Olympics. He told them. Olympics? Mina asked. A pre-quirk year sports competition. Anyway, in the sports festival, you'll be going through a number of random events, and a lot of pro heroes will be watching for internships. In any case, the sports festival happens this Friday. Aizawa-sensei. Iida called out, is it such a good idea to hold such a large event so soon after an attack? Yes, we need to show that UA is unaffected more than ever, and there will be heightened security. That reminds me, Iida and Yoirozu, you two need to stay after school. We have your first jobs today after what happened. Aizawa finished his spiel, and sighed. The final bell went not too long after, and the student representative stayed behind as asked. He brought the 2 students to his desk where he explained what would be happening after the sports festival. The introduction of the dorm system. They each got a pencil, and started creating the room layouts. By the time the class's president and vice president were done, a half-hour had passed, and the sun was noticeably lower in the sky. For the boys, Izuku, Bakugo, Iida and Todoroki were on floor 5. Floor 4 consisted of Shoji, Sato, Kirishima and Sero. Floor 3 had Koda, Kaminari and Ojiro, and finally floor 2 had Mineta, Aoyama, and Tokoyami. For the girls, floor 5 had Yoirozu and Jiro, floor 4 had Toru and Ashido, and floor 3 had Asui and Uraraka. Aizawa was adequately satisfied with the floor plan, and nodded for the remaining 2 students to take their leave, as he filed the forms to Nezu. The parents shouldn't be too hard to convince, hopefully. After filing the paperwork, he picked up his signature yellow sleeping bag and went to his car, off home. He needed sleep. And cats. Mostly cats. Izuku was beat. He had spent the past few days mostly reading. His room, whilst it had some hero memorabilia, was mostly filled with books, fiction, non-fiction and notebooks all equal. If you were to walk in, you'd think it'd be a library. He had also spent a lot of time doing what was effectively meditating. It was needless to say basically a polar opposite to what his brother was doing. Kocchan has spent the time training, and somehow getting into more arguments than usual with their mother. Somehow they were having more conflict than normal, and quite frankly Izuku did not want to get involved. Eventually Friday came around, and the day of the sports festival was here. He had been told that morning that, because he came first in the entrance exams, he'd have to give a brief speech of some sorts. Great. While stressing over that, he had gone through the morning on autopilot, their mother wishing them luck, and the sheepy, quote, watching them kick those other kids' asses. On the way to school Bakugo was pretending to pay attention to his brother's ramblings of something. There was a mix between speech writing, some kind of physics, strategy, and a general vibe of "ah fuck," even if Izuku wouldn't say those exact words. As amusing as it was, by the time they got to school, Bakugo made a small explosion in front of Izuku's face as they entered the classroom. It was sufficient, as his brother apologized and greeted Four Eyes and Round Face, before making his to his seat, Bakugo close behind. The class clambered onto the bus, everyone ecstatic for the events of the sports festival. No one of them had any idea what to expect from this year's, as most had watched the year's prior festivals. Much to Ida's dismay, the way in which everyone got on was disorganized and chaotic, and despite his attempts to control the class, the bus was filled with the chaos of excited teenagers. Once they arrived, Aizawa-sensei directed them to a waiting room where they would stay until their class was called out to the center, and speeches would be made before the first event would be announced. Izuku was stressing out and kind of detached from reality, until he watched Todoroki approach his brother. With a glare that was pointed at Kocchan but not really directed to him, Todoroki got dangerously close to the explosive boy. Looking at it objectively, "I'm stronger than you," Todoroki stated, the silence in the room deafening as everyone watched for the irritable blonde's reaction. "Alright, first, that's a fucking lie, and second, what the fuck do you want then you half and half bastard?" Kocchan replied. "This is a declaration of war. I am going to beat you with my ice, and my ice alone. I will prove I don't my old man's quirk, and you will be my tool to do so," Todoroki replied. Kocchan was visibly twitching. Izuku watched in horror as Kocchan opened his mouth to speak, a dangerous fire in his eyes. He was ever so thankful when President Mick announced that Class 1 would be coming out onto the field, and despite the tense air, they all still soaked in the atmosphere of the cheering crowd. Izuku looked around, doing his best to steel his nerves as the other classes were introduced, before the inevitable announcement was made. And here to make an opening speech for the first years is Izuku. Taking a breath, he walked up to the microphone and began talking, only to be cut off by feedback. Quickly suppressing his quirk and hoping no one saw too much of it, he continued, "I look forward to competing, not just a chance to have fun, but as a chance to compare myself to others," he continued, looking back at his class, "but most of all as a chance to learn and improve. I am grateful to be at such a prestigious school." Great, looked like Iida was rubbing off on him, "and look forward to doing my best against all of your bests. Plus ultra." He finished, looking at the crowd to gauge a response. It soon erupted into cheers from pro heroes, and the other years and students not participating alike. He smiled blindingly, a mix of happiness and relief, and stepped down. Izuku listened as President Mick directed everyone's attention to the rated hero. Midnight. "Alright kiddos, here is the first event," she called out, directing everyone's attention to the giant spinning wheel on the screen, an obstacle course race, with quirks free of course. "On your marks." As she started the countdown, a large concrete door rolled down to reveal a tunnel. "Good set." Izuku heard Midnight scream, thinking fast. He didn't want to use his quirk yet as to save energy in his head. Ideally, he could get by with minimal usage of his quirk. "Go." With the last yell, Izuku used a small amount of his green lightning to boost his legs, and so he bounded up, over the top of the packed-in students. Just before he landed, Todoroki froze everyone in the ground ahead, causing him to tumble as he landed. He watched students who could fly soar over the ice, as others stumbled. As he tried to regain his balance to continue onwards, he watches Mineta bouncing across his hair orbs, screaming something about becoming popular, before getting hit by one of the robots from the entrance exam. And here is the first obstacle. "Robots from the entrance exam," President Mick screamed. Izuku watched as Mineta curled over by the barrier, and turned his attention back to the robots. Continuing to bite his strength, he only slightly charged his arm as he punched one of the robots, with a small discharge on impact. He took a chunk of the debris with him, hoping to find a use for it later. Running further down, and thankfully off of all the ice, there was a line of the zero-pointers. Todoroki had frozen one, causing it to collapse. Utilizing slightly additional lightning in his legs, he sped up and ran between the legs of the robot before it collapsed. Not unscathed, thankfully the debris earlier picked up absorbed most of the damage, but that'd still leave a mark. Hopefully with the way he's been using his quirk, people will think it's an enhancement type, as there is always a fighting tournament at the end of the sports festival. Focusing on running ahead, he was part of the top 10, and came across the next obstacle. A canyon with pillars, connected by cables. Izuku quickly got to crawling across. His quirk wouldn't be able to improve his center of balance. Maybe there was a way. Probably not a good time to find out. Shimmying his way across, he found himself far behind, maybe top 50 at the best, and in front of a minefield, introduced far earlier by President Mick when the frontrunners arrived. How can I get to the front? I need a sudden burst of power, but I can't safely do that. Wait, the landmines. Izuku quickly got to gathering landmines carefully together, using the debris from earlier. Ignoring the looks he was getting from other students, he gathered the last few mines, and jumped using the debris as a sled. Nejire was currently a ball of energy, and it was beginning to drive Mirio insane. Of course, it made sense. Her curiosity was undeniably going to be at its peak because of the sports festival, whilst theirs would happen later in the day. Currently it was the first year's festival, and there was a plethora of new quirks for her to question. Mirio glanced over at the girl who never stopped talking since the race had begun. She had been asking questions left, right and center about literally every student, about their quirk, and what the limitations were. This didn't mean he didn't miss the brief flash of recognition in her eyes, whilst Izuku was giving the opening speech. It quickly disappeared, however. Mirio thought he recognized the boy as well, but it was hard to tell. His face was plain, and generally uninteresting. What did interest Mirio, however, was seemingly how the boy didn't use his quirk. I mean, he was part of the hero course, so he definitely had one. It seemed this interested Nejire too, because whenever the cameras had the boy even remotely in shot, she had her attention focused on him. It could be a thought-based quirk, or something that can't be seen. The former was seeming more likely as they watched the boy react to situations on the fly. But the way he jumped over everyone at the start made the latter more likely. Mirio shook his head, trying to focus on the race. Sir was probably watching as well, almost definitely being interested by the boy. Whilst one camera was focused on the front runners, there was another camera focusing on anything interesting happening. This happened to be a particular green-haired boy. Mirio and his friends watched in confusion, with more questions coming from Nejire's mouth, as the green-haired boy was seen digging up mines using a piece of metal debris he had gotten earlier. Their confusion was quickly replaced by understanding and worry, as the boy proceeded to launch himself onto the pile of mines, flying over the majority of the competitors to line up with the two front runners. Izuku did not think this part through. How am I meant to land? Were all he thought as he soared over the rest of the landmines and the majority of the competitors, and he was on a collision course with Todoroki and Kocchan. Wait, maybe that was the answer. Thinking quickly, he positioned himself so that one would inevitably have to land, he would be able to continue to propel himself over the remainder of the mines, and hopefully end up knocking over the other boys in the process. He waited until he was marginally in front of the boys, and the moment he yelled at his brother, "Hey Kocchan, catch." And with that he threw the metal plate down. The result, it hit 3 landmines, and due to his position Izuku was blown forward further, just past the edge of the minefield, and the other boys were sent reeling back, doing their best not to end up in a chain reaction of the landmine explosions. Mirio, Nejire, and Tamaki were all in awe of what just happened. They, along with the rest of the crowd and teachers, were in shock after witnessing the events that unfolded in a matter of seconds. Someone who was back around mid-40s in terms of placement, had just used the landmines to propel themselves forward and send the 2 front runners reeling back. Coming in first is Izuku of Class 1A. Closely followed by Bakugo in second and Todoroki in third. Midnight announced, snapping her whip as she talked. Bakugo, the blonde-haired boy, was walking up to Izuku as the two began talking as though the latter definitely didn't just casually overtake and sabotage the other. At least it seemed casual initially before there was a sharp glare, and the two boys separated with Izuku pulling a notebook and pen out of seemingly thin air, and Bakugo sporting a scowl. "You nerd, I'm so beating your shitty ass later on," Bakugo said, shooting a sharp glare at his brother. "Yeah, whatever, spiky hair, like you could even touch me," Izuku responded with his own glare. It was, needless to say, fairly soft, but still a glare for Izuku nonetheless. Bakugo watched his brother pull out one of his notebooks and writing about something in there. It was hard to tell. He turned his attention back towards Midnight, as did his brother, who was introducing the next event. "What's it gonna land on? It's going to be a cavalry battle. The first 42 students in the race will be allowed to compete." She took a break for a moment to allow the students who placed 43 and below begrudgingly leave. "Those fucking extras don't deserve to be here anyway, especially the business bitches," Bakugo thought as everyone waited for Midnight to continue. "So the rules are simple. Every student forms a team of 2 to 4, with a headband representing your team's collective points." Midnight continued, an animation assisting her explanation. "Your goal is to collect as many of these points as possible. The top 4 teams will be moving on. You may use your quirk, and do anything at will, so long as your horse rider, the one wearing the headbands, does not touch the ground, and you do not intentionally try and injure other students or break their horse up." Midnight took a break as students began to discuss. Snapping her whip again, "You have 20 minutes to create and plan teams. Good luck." Midnight finished off. Bakugo looked around, and quickly formed a team with soy face, shitty hair and raccoon eyes. "So, what's the plan, explosive guy?" Shitty hair asked, we going for the 1 mil, or what? No chance shitty hair, Bakugo replied. Wait what, why Bakugo? Cause Izuku's gonna be overprepared. That nerd has 20 fucking minutes to plan for every and anything. They, as far as we're concerned, don't fucking count, Bakugo explained. We will win by overwhelming every other team. Izuku had never wanted to melt more. Maybe there was a way to do that, if he heats himself up enough using his quirk. Unlikely though. He went over to Uraraka and Iida to see if they'd be on his team. I thank you for the request, but I will decline, Iida replied, shocking both Izuku and Uraraka. I am here to do my best, and being on your team will not allow me to showcase that. I'll still be on your team. Uraraka called out once Iida started walking away to Todoroki. Thanks Uraraka. Hi. Can I be on your team? My babies will be of great use. The girl with pink hair and a ridiculous amount of gadgets came up to them. Babies? Uraraka asked, mildly concerned. Gadgets for those who are not top-notch inventors. Right, and your name is? Izuku asked, trying to get this unique interaction back on track. I am Mei Hatsumi of 1H. Now, may I be on your team? Yes, definitely. Show me your gadgets in a moment, but first we need one more member, someone defensive. Izuku responded. Glancing around, he saw a familiar bird-headed boy brooding off to the side. Tokoyami. Will you join us? Very well, I shall assist in your conquest. Tokoyami replied, heading towards the trio. Right, Izuku replied. Anyway, here's the plan you guys. Bakugo looked around, his team all set up. Looking around, he saw Izuku on a team with round face, bird head and some pink-haired bitch he didn't recognize who had a lot of gadgets. It looked like they were completely set up, and probably untouchable. Izuku sent his brother a glance that told Bakugo everything he needed to know. I know you aren't coming, but even if you were you wouldn't stand a chance, was everything sent with that short glance. Bakugo shot back a smirk, and focused on Midnight as she held her whip up high. Ready. Go. And with a yell from Midnight, chaos proceeded to unravel in UA's Sports Festival Stadium. Mirio watched in awe as Izuku's team immediately got bombarded by various teams with all sorts of quirks, yet managed to avoid every attack, and after the first minute the attacks seemed to slow down. Izuku was holding a long metal rod that had the appearance of a lightning rod, presumably courtesy of the pink-haired girl who seemed to be from the support course. The end that wasn't in his hand was placed firmly on the ground. Mirio watched in awe as Izuku's arm and a lightning rod lit up with green lightning, and the ground nearby did something similar. The ground had a few streaks of large green lightning going through, splitting it. Literally. The ground affected by the lightning suddenly burst, the concrete shattering into dozens of pieces, creating an unstable and seemingly unpassable barrier, as a result of the rocky and unpredictable ground. The lightning from the rod and Izuku's arm died down as well, presumably the boy deactivating his quirk. So the lightning boy did make it in. Mirio thought as he glanced over at Nejire to see if she recognized him as well. Her eyes had a different light to the usual one, and questions had stopped pouring out of her mouth. And she has recognized him too, Tamaki might as well, but I doubt it, Mirio thought further, as the trio watched Izuku's team set up their position. It was almost infallible. Most teams had given up with attacking them as they were afraid of the incredibly uneven terrain that resulted. Most teams. There was still one, the Todoroki team, he believed, whose assault was unrelenting. He and his team were trying various methods to pass the barrier of rocky ground, from a girl trying to make wooden planks to him trying to use ice to allow them to pass it. Each of these were destroyed almost immediately by a brief flash of green lightning originating from the boy holding the lightning rod. Bakugo and his crew took a breather. They had gathered several other teams' headbands during the chaos of the first minute, and spent the last 5 minutes fending off the odd retaliator, but overall were doing fairly well. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Izuku's team effortlessly fending off Todoroki's advancements with occasional flashes of green lightning, as Izuku destroyed whatever attempted bridge was built. He smirked as he watched the boy with candy cane hair becoming more and more agitated with each unsuccessful attempt. Bakugo's attention was suddenly snapped back to reality, when a smug-looking blonde student from 1B stole his primary headband. Railing in anger, he didn't hear the calls of his teammates as he used his explosions to propel him skywards, and towards the other blonde boy, who had used a quirk to create an air disc in Bakugo's way. All this did was give Bakugo a platform to land on as he reached for the blonde-haired boy's collection of headbands around his neck, and yanked them away, ignoring the yelps of protest from the other boy and his team. He was yanked back by Soyface, the tape that was connected him to his back jolting Bakugo in the process. Once he was back with his team, they started scolding him. Bro. Don't just go off like that, Shitty Hair told him. Yeah, whatever, I'll do whatever the fuck I want, Bakugo replied, whacking the hard-headed boy on the head. Man, can you just chill out? Soyface interjected, earning a sharp glare from Bakugo. Never mind, point taken. Eyes, don't worry about that. Raccoon Eyes interrupted, we're currently second. First if we ignore Izuku's team. Bakugo looked up to the board displaying the leaderboard to see his team name underneath Izuku's. He smirked. Alright extras, new plan, Bakugo informed his team. We're going off the offensive and are gonna defend until the last minute. Then we return and unleash havoc on all the others. Izuku was suppressing the urge to yawn. The constant, small but mentally intensive use of his quirk was having an ever so slight impact on him. He sighed as he watched Todoroki try once more to use an ice bridge to cross the debris, only for it to be shattered almost immediately. The ice and fire user had been falling down steadily in the point rankings as a result of his undivided attention on Izuku, and it was surprising to see such a normally level-headed person become so irrational and angry at the task at hand. Out of the corner of his eye, throughout the first few minutes, he had noticed his brother taking full advantage of the situation, and Todoroki in his ignorance, failed to realize that his team had dropped down into 4th, only 5 points ahead of the team in 5th. Getting bored of the constant mundane assault, Izuku decided to bring Todoroki's attention to this. Todoroki, he called out, getting the attention of the fire and ice user. You're not going to make it to the next stage at this rate. I'll make it in when I take your headband and undeniably grasp first place. Todoroki responded, much to the dismay of the rest of his team. Well, I wouldn't count on it then, Izuku sighed, watching Todoroki's team attempt to convince him otherwise. Eventually they succeeded as they left to pick off some small fry, and Izuku's team began the next stage of their plan. Using some of Mei's inventions, Uraraka's quirk and dark shadow, they placed various traps up high in the sky, each one with green lightning sparking through it. It was a small mental effort and hardly any actual energy used, but would definitely be enough to briefly stun any attackers. And briefly was all they needed. Once Dark Shadow had gotten the traps to the desired location, he retreated back to Tokoyami. Izuku's team had remained safe, with no other teams trying to pass the unsteady concrete that sealed them off. There were only a few minutes left, and they had a feeling Todoroki would come back sooner or later. They had set those traps up as a trump card of sorts. They would be dropped in the final minute, and could be used to effectively make an electrical minefield between them, and any team that wanted to try and advance against them. After successfully warding off various attacks for the past few minutes, President Mick's voice brought the attention of all teams. Alright little listeners, it's the last minute. He screeched, and Izuku's team was swiftly put into action. Similarly, Todoroki's team started coming to Izuku's team with the intent of snatching the 1 million point headband from them. Izuku watched the boy with red and white hair come straight towards his team, trying a different strategy to get over. Izuku watched as Todoroki prepared his team. It seemed like they had something planned. Tapping Uraraka on the head was the signal for her to release the anti-gravity on the floating traps, and as they landed they each released their small payload of green lightning. Todoroki and his team were taken aback by the seemingly offensive play, and briefly stalled, their plans halted. Izuku smirked, as he made a connection with the ground through the lightning rod again, and sent green lightning through it. He intentionally made the display more flashy than usual, as he wasn't actually planning anything with this in particular, but he hoped it would be enough to ward the other team off. This didn't stop him from sending it through the ground as well, however, in the direction of the offending team. This had the desired effect, causing the other team to briefly move backwards. Just long enough for him to redirect the already sent lightning, back up the lightning rod and back into him, so he could store it for later. Todoroki's team realized this, and with a look of irritation on their faces they prepared themselves. Izuku had an idea what would happen, and told Tokoyami it was time. The bird-headed boy nodded in response, sending Dark Shadow out as a barrier between them and the other team. Izuku placed the lightning rod onto the weird connection Dark Shadow and Tokoyami had, not that that was his present concern, and carefully sent lightning into Dark Shadow. Except this wasn't his bright green lightning. This was different, a carefully modified one that was a dark almost black-green. This was to utilize the best of both in powering up Dark Shadow and the creature's fondness for darkness. Izuku watched as Todoroki's team had already set in motion, too late to react to the ever-expanding creature. He hid a smirk as he watched Iida's face twist in terror, as he propelled his team headfirst into the growing creature. Todoroki looked like he flinched as he tried to bring an ice ramp up to launch his team upwards, however it was quickly destroyed by a combination of Dark Shadow's swipes and green lightning. There were less than 30 seconds left now, and President Mick was hyping up the crowd, as everyone watched the showdown between the team that was decisively first, and the team that contained Endeavor's son. There was only time for one more real attempt from Todoroki's team, and both teams knew this. Izuku's team had fought by only doing the bare minimum to hold their position, whereas Todoroki's had gone all out, and as such had wasted most of their energy already. In other words, unless Todoroki's team pulled a trump card out of thin air, they had no chance. Izuku knew they had one trump card. He doubted Todoroki would use it, but he was well aware it existed. It would easily deal with Dark Shadow, and either he nor Uraraka could counter it, and although chances are Hatsume had some counter to it, if Todoroki was fast enough, it would be worthless. Izuku and his team watched in tense anticipation as the timer ticked down, all waiting to see if Todoroki would use his fire. There were less than 10, agonizingly slow seconds on the clock, and President Mick was decidedly not helping as he was loudly announcing every second. With only 5 seconds on the clock, Izuku's team watched in awe as Todoroki's left side began to flare up with a dramatic spark spreading from his head to his hand. Unfortunately, it was short-lived. As soon as it appeared, it became nothing more than a faint trail of smoke. Izuku was disappointed by whatever grudge Todoroki held that caused the fire to die, and he saw a conflicted look in Todoroki's eyes as President Mick announced the time was up. "Alright, little listeners," he called out, gathering all the students' attention. "In first place, we have Team Izuku. In second place, Team Todoroki. In third, Team Bakugo." Izuku noticed his brother was slightly disgruntled by this, but seemed relatively happy enough to be in the final tournament at all, and in fourth, Team Shinso. All other students can return to their designated seating area, or if needs be to Recovery Girl. There will be a half-hour break before the first match of the tournament, Izuku against Shinso. The rest of the matchups will be shown on the screen. In the meantime, relax, little listeners. Izuku and his team exchanged congratulations and well wishes before he was pulled aside by Todoroki. "So tell me, Izuku," Todoroki started once they were in one of the tunnels. All other students passed. "What do you know of quirk marriages?" Bakugo looked around in mild irritation. That half-and-half bastard had gone off to talk to his brother somewhere, so he was stuck talking to Shitty Hair and some other extras. He sighed as his gaze wandered down to the field, which was currently being repaired by Cementus, after some serious destruction to the arena, mostly courtesy of Izuku's team's strategy. Bakugo listened as the boys were talking about something, and did his best to restrain himself from murdering Kaminari and Mineta, after it became apparent that they had tricked the girls into being cheerleaders as part of the intermission. That didn't stop him from leaving smoky marks on either of their shoulders though. He glanced up at the tournament brackets. His first fight would be up against Round Face, and then up against Shitty Hair Tail Dork, depending on who won. He sighed as he waited in boredom for the first match to start. He couldn't wait to see his brother kick the general education kid's ass. Izuku, on the other hand, was currently standing in the tunnel with Todoroki, who was leaning against the wall, in a slight shock. Their marriage is with the purpose of creating a child with a hybrid quirk. "Why?" Izuku answered, gears in his head spinning. "Well, my old man was, and still is, obsessed with becoming the #1 hero. Through any means, and that includes if it is something of his own creation, rather than his own doing." Todoroki elaborated, a slight glare directed at the wall next to Izuku. "So, you're..." "Yes. I am my father's perfect creation, purely for the purpose of surpassing All Might. I apologize for earlier. It is clear that the one I should beat is not Bakugo, but in fact you. I will beat you with my ice alone, and prove that my old man is useless." Todoroki finished before walking away, a hardened stare once more not directed at Izuku, but at the wall near him. Izuku was in a slight daze, his mind wandering as he was preoccupied in his own thoughts, mindlessly walking to his designated waiting room. He absent-mindedly pulled out a notebook, this one numbered 16, he wrote through them faster with his quirk, and with so many new people about, there was an abundance of quirks to write and theorize about, and started making a few notes in a new section, when someone came through the door. "Ojiro. Why are you here?" Izuku said, the sudden entrance startling the boy who was previously entranced in the notebook. "I have some information about your opponent," he replied, slightly irked. "Shinso. Weren't you on his team for the cavalry battle?" "Yes, but he wasn't on my team." "Wah. Shinso has a brainwashing quirk. I'm not sure how it's activated, but I believe it's deactivated by either him or some degree of a jolt to the brain, like a head knock or something similar." "Okay, so when you're in that state, he has to order you to directly do things, correct?" "Yes, it has to be fairly specific, although there are minor actions that are natural that he doesn't have to order you to do, such as breath." Ojiro finished, backing out of the room. "Hold on, how did you find this out?" Izuku said, stopping the other boy from leaving the room. Ojiro had a look of irritation and frustration on his face as he replied, "Shinso used it on us to make us team up with him, and throughout the cavalry battle. I don't even remember anything from it. In any case, I've asked someone from the team in 5th place to take my position, Tetsu or something like that. Good luck, Izuku, you'll need it." Ojiro finished, closing the door to the waiting room as he left. Izuku returned to his notebook and with his pen in hand, he started making a profile for his opponent based on the information he was given so far. It was inconclusive, but with some notes on other similar quirks either memorized or in the book, he had memorized most basic information and a handful of other details for each quirk he could recall on the fly. But if he needed full information, he'd rely on his notebooks. He was able to make a few theories about activation. If it was eye contact like Aizawa Sensei's, it'd be impossible to maintain on multiple people, let alone people he was on top of. If it was contact-based, there was no reason for it to be activated before Ojiro and Shinso made contact. He concluded that it must be activated by a vocal response of some sort. Making note of the deactivation condition as well, he prepared a vague strategy, just in case he was to fall victim to the brainwashing. He finished the last note with a flick of the pen, finalizing the character he was writing, and closing the book as he heard President Mick's announcement of the field being ready, and the first match was about to start. "Alright everybody. Present Mick screeched, much to the displeasure of a lot of people, but most of all was Sensei, who hissed slightly. We have the first match of the tournament coming up now. Please welcome from Class 1A, Izuku. And from Class 1C, Shinso. Izuku, whilst walking out, let out a sigh of relief as he was thankful Present Mick didn't go all out with his introductions. Walking up the now fixed arena, he fixed eyes with his opponent. A very tired-looking boy with purple hair, or Shinso. Are both competitors ready? Midnight yelled. Both boys nodded in response, staring each other down. Fight. With Midnight's yell initiating them, Shinso started spouting words in an attempt to get Izuku to respond. Vocal activation, got it. Izuku had started using some power in his legs, and prepared himself to launch at the other boy, the lightning beginning to arc off of him. Oh, what an impressive quirk, you'll make a great hero easily. Shinso started, taunting me to reply, all flash, you'll make such a popular hero. You'd never have to save a soul, let alone try and work. That's no. Izuku snapped, only to remember the whole brainwashing thing. Damn it. Gotcha, Shinso replied with a smirk, now turn around, and walk out of bounds. Izuku knew that he would be given control back the moment he was brainwashed, as there was no way Shinso would know that he was holding a small bout of charge in his head. Hopefully it was charged enough to give him the sufficient jolt he needed to break the brainwashing. And just that it did, the spectators watched in awe as Izuku's head briefly had lightning arc off of it, and his eyes returned to the usual deep green as he turned around, smirking at Shinso. If he wanted to say something, now would be the time to do it, as he wouldn't be replying. Izuku took one look at Shinso, before breaking into a run towards the other boy, as he prepared to take him out. Shinso, Izuku started before they could ask any questions. Being a hero isn't about the fame or popularity. Izuku took a brief breath as he began charging the lightning through his body, his hair standing on end. With his eyes and hair both turning a vibrant green as lightning arced off his entire body, it's about helping those in need. You could be a great hero, and no one needs to know your name, you just need to help those that need it. Izuku, with Shinso briefly distracted, braced himself and launched at the other boy, reaching in mere moments and pushing the boy out of bounds. Shinso stumbled over the boundary, and collapsed onto the ground. He was still in a state of shock as Midnight declared Izuku the winner. He looked at Izuku, who was offering him a hand. You can be a great hero, Shinso. Your quirk would be perfect for hostage situations, or defusing a villain without violence. Shinso took Izuku's hand, with the green-haired boy beaming at him. Shinso tried to play it off and be aloof, but inside he was ecstatic. Yeah. He asked nonchalantly, as he walked with the other boy, so what if you believe in me, that's not enough to have an op. Shinso tried arguing, only to be cut off by a hand over his mouth. The boy who did it was still beaming at him, and pointed towards the stands where many of the pro-heroes were, including teachers. All of them discussing how good Shinso would be. Izuku knew Shinso was on the tears of joy. He could see the joyful light in the purple-haired boy's eyes, and the slight shimmer of water. Oh, and Shinso. Izuku added as he started walking away, I look forward to seeing you in 1A. And with those closing words, Izuku walked through the tunnel and back up to his class's area, leaving a frozen Shinso behind. Bakugo smirked as he watched his brother encourage the support course boy. It didn't surprise him that his brother did that, he was that kind of person. Once Izuku had returned, Bakugo congratulated him with a slap on the back and a threat, you're one step closer to being beaten by me. To which Izuku chuckled nervously and shrugged his brother off before going to sit with 4 eyes and round face, a notebook and pen forming out of seemingly thin air. Bakugo swore he had a second quirk that produces the aforementioned item. Bakugo returned to his seat next to Shitty Hair, as Soyface went down for his match against the half-and-half bastard. It was no surprise to him, nor the rest of the class, when Icy Hot won. However, what they didn't expect was the excessive nature of the wall of ice that completely immobilized Soyface. It took 5 minutes for Todoroki to free the other boy, and a further 15 before the field was prepared for the next match. Now Bakugo wouldn't admit it out loud, but the extreme aggression displayed by Icy Hot did impress him somewhat, and he couldn't wait to explode his ass. But that would have to wait. Right now, he had to shut his brother's mumbles up before Bakugo managed to drill a hole into that damned notebook with his glare. Izuku was eager to write notes on the preceding matches. Unfortunately, there were not many notes to make on Todoroki's and Sero's fight. Unless maybe Sero could have honed his tape into a sharper form. Does he have the ability to control tape like that? Maybe he could create different brands or styles of tape, or individually control attributes like how much it sticks or may. Izuku's train of thought was suddenly broken off when a small explosion appeared in front of him, startling him and causing the notebook and pen to go flying. Thankfully, he did manage to catch it, and with a look of exasperation directed at Kak-chan, who was just smirking in victory, he shut his mouth and focused on the upcoming bout between Shiozaki and Kaminari. Returning to his seat and focusing on the match in front. President Mick introduced Shiozaki as a, quote, assassin, which he did not appreciate, and had a brief argument with him, before returning to face the opposing combatant. With a sigh, President Mick gestured to Midnight to start the match, which involved Kaminari short-circuiting after using 1.3 million volts, only to be blocked by a dense wall of Shiozaki's vine hair, which she then used to push the, now defenseless, boy out of the ring. Izuku was writing in his notebook, without muttering this time, as he waited for the next match to begin. He was writing some theories regarding Shiozaki's quirk when he got interrupted by a blonde-haired boy from Class 1BO. Look at that. Someone from 1B beat someone from 1A. Maybe. The boy in question was suddenly cut off when he slumped and fell to the ground. Sorry about Monoma. An orange-haired girl called. Hi. I'm Itsuka Kendo of Class 1B. Izuku nervously waved back, as did some of his classmates, after watching the peculiar scene go down. After the class watched that go down, they waited for the next match to begin with groups carrying out their own peaceful conversations. Izuku and Uraraka engaged in conversation whilst they waited for Iida's match to begin. He was up against Mei Hatsume, the girl they had worked with throughout the cavalry battle that was seemingly equipped for anything, so at this point it could go either way. Izuku kept the notebook and pen handy. Whilst there wasn't really an awful lot he could write about, there was probably going to be something. Right. Boy were there on. Izuku and Uraraka both felt like they were going to die of second-hand embarrassment, as they watched their friend being used as though he were a billboard advertisement. To make it worse for him, he did not win, because he managed to beat his opponent, but because Hatsume simply walked out of the ring. To say it was painful was an understatement, and even President Mick could pick up on this, and quickly moved the audience onto the next match, Aoyama vs Ashido. This was, much to Aoyama's disappointment, embarrassing, if not equally. Whilst initially he was holding her back with spurts of attacks with his naval laser, he was eventually outclassed by her athleticism, and he fired for too long, resulting in a stomachache. Him doubling over, and being subsequently knocked out by Ashido with an uppercut. He ended up going out on a stretcher with hardly a fraction of dignity left. By this point, Iida had returned with an incredibly downcast expression, and sat next to Uraraka and joined in watching Aoyama's defeat. It did help him feel less bad, and he joined in on the conversation with his friends, as President Mick announced the next match, between Tokoyami and Yoirozu. Izuku watched as Tokoyami managed to cleanly move Yoirozu out of the ring, as she took too long to react, indecision overwhelming her whilst Dark Shadow repeatedly attacked the raven-haired girl. It was clear she was frustrated by the swift loss, seemingly effortless on Dark Shadow's part, as the two returned to the classes area. By the time they had returned, Kirishima had already left for his match against Setsutetsu, and Uraraka had gone down to the waiting room to prepare for their match against Bakugo, who had gone down to their respective waiting room as well. Watching the present match, it was like watching someone fight their reflection. Both Kirishima and Setsutetsu had some form of hardening quirk, with the latter having a steel skin. Eventually both were knocked out by the other with powerful right hooks. As amusing it was to watch happen, both were carried out on stretchers, and there would need to be a tiebreaker of some sort later on. In the meantime, the next match, Bakugo against Uraraka, would be held. The two contestants walked onto the field, and with the crack of Midnight's whip, they began. Izuku knew how both would fight as a result of knowing them both well, and they both had raw determinations as they stared each other down. Bakugo, he knew, would focus on counterattacks as a way to preserve energy until he saw fit, but Uraraka would be on the offensive to try and catch Bakugo off guard, to float him out of the arena. Uraraka, unrelenting, continued charging at Bakugo, who deflected her time and time again with an explosion, ripping the arena up more and more as he went. Uraraka was floating pieces of the arena up into the sky as a final attack, but Bakugo seemed oblivious to this. As did some pros who were getting annoyed that Bakugo seemed to be toying with the girl. Boo. Finish it already. Some random pro called from the stands. Bakugo heard this and stiffened slightly, but before he could yell a choice selection of profanities, Aizawa-sensei responded with the microphone. He's doing the right thing, not underestimating his opponent. As a pro, you should know this, Aizawa-sensei reprimanded. Besides, he's right not to. As a pro, I'm disappointed you haven't noticed yet. Once Aizawa-sensei finished talking, he looked up to Uraraka's developing meteor shower, which effectively shut the pros up. Uraraka, taking advantage of Bakugo's momentary distraction, released the meteor shower in an attempt to distract him further. The whistling of the falling rocks successfully caught Bakugo's attention, and bracing himself to use two hands, he released a massive explosion that managed to break all the rocks, but dust and smoke obscuring his view for a while. Izuku watched as Bakugo reacted to Uraraka's attempt to catch him off guard, and he blew her away in the nick of time. Or at least, that's what everyone thought had happened until the smoke cleared, to show that it was only a decoy of her jacket, with Uraraka's quirk used on it to make it float. Within seconds of it being blown away, Uraraka got centimeters away from touching Bakugo, but the boy managed to react in the nick of time, setting off an explosion on his back to blow her away. Bakugo and the crowd waited in tense silence as Uraraka got back up to her feet, only to collapse moments later when she passed out from exhaustion. Midnight declared Bakugo the winner, and called out Setsutetsu and Kirishima to have their tiebreaker now. Whilst they were clearing the arena for the tiebreaker, Izuku went down to his waiting room. On the way there, he noticed a disgruntled Endeavor and a mildly pissed off Todoroki, but that was a bit of an understatement. He quietly walked past the father-son duo, hoping not to attract any attention. That didn't work, as he felt two hardened glares in his direction. Gulping, he hurried past and straight into his waiting room with a sigh. Luckily there was a TV in the room, where he could watch the outcome of the current tiebreaker, whilst planning in slightly more peace. Pulling out his notebook, he began making notes as he watched Kirishima defeat Tetsu in an arm wrestle, before extending his hand to help the steel boy who had fallen down. After that, President Mick announced it was time for his match against Todoroki. Stealing his nerve, he pocketed his notebook and pen, before making his way onto the stage. Mirio watched in interest as the boys who could not be more copy-pasted if they tried, but he, as did the rest of the crowd, were all waiting in tense anticipation for the next match. The powerful son of Endeavor, Todoroki, and a hyped-up Izuku whose quirk was still not fully understood, nor the full potential of it. Midnight, for the 9th time that day, asked if the two competitors were ready. Both boys nodded, and the moment Midnight said go, Todoroki began building a massive ice wall. However, when it reached Izuku, who had hair standing on end and vibrant green eyes, Izuku simply held his hand out, and seemingly caught the building ice wall. With a flash of bright green, the ice structure was filled with green lightning and shattered, much to the amazement of the crowd, and the irritation of Todoroki, who did it again. Once more, it was shattered by the display of green lightning. Mirio glanced sideways to see Nejire's reaction, who, much to his amusement, was completely captivated by the green-haired boy. Whilst throughout the other matches she was constantly asking questions, in the ones involving the boy, she remained silent with white eyes. Izuku on the other hand, was growing in irritation with numbness beginning to overcome his hand, and the need to hold the freezing cold structure, albeit brief, was decidedly not helping. But more irritatingly, was how uncaring Todoroki seemed about this, attacking without thinking, glaring at someone who was not there, focusing on an opponent who wasn't Izuku. Having had watched the attack a couple times himself, he knew the giant structure did not build up instantly, and there were a few seconds as it began building up. Coming up with a plan, Izuku decided next time that would happen, he would strike. Having had just destroyed another ice structure, he let the charge flow through his body, rather than focusing it through his right hand. He probably wouldn't be able to strike strong with that one, so he had to use his weaker hand, hopefully being strong enough with the lightning backing him up. Todoroki began creating another ice structure, but before it could get higher than 5 meters, Izuku began running straight into it, moving faster with his lightning, and used a powered-up left punch to destroy the forming ice. As soon as the ice was destroyed, he continued running, and once he got to Todoroki, he powered up his right fist, and caught the ice and fire user in the jaw with a powerful right hook. "Where are you looking?" Izuku screamed as his fists made contact. Todoroki was flung to the side, his sharp gaze directing towards Izuku. Using his ice as a slide, he barely stopped himself from flying out of the arena, and directed the flow back towards the other boy, in an attempt to freeze him. Todoroki did manage to catch Izuku's right hand with his own, freezing it before the boy broke contact. Upon breaking contact, Izuku sent a small charge of lightning through his arm and shattered the ice, but his arm was so numb it was almost useless at this point. Keyword being almost. "You can't beat me with just half your power, Todoroki." Izuku screamed, staring Todoroki down. "You can't become the best only trying half as hard as everyone else." Todoroki's only response was to send another ice wave at Izuku, who broke it with a flash of green from his left hand this time. "Come on. Are you trying to lose?" Izuku yelled, this time with eye contact from the other boy. "Use your fire." "No?" Todoroki yelled, ice slowly forming on his right side as he launched another attack. "I will not use that bastard's power." Who said anything about his power? Izuku yelled, bracing himself to launch at the boy once he destroyed the ice structure. "It's your quirk, so use it." Izuku finished his sentence before charging at the boy again, striking the boy's torso with an accelerated right cross. "And there goes use of my right arm." "God damn it," Izuku thought as after making contact, his arm fell limply to the side. Todoroki was flying back from the hit, seemingly in a daze, as Izuku returned to a reversed version of his usual stance, with his right arm dangling by his side in numbness. Izuku began pulling power in his left arm instead, when Todoroki snapped out of his daze and landed onto the ground, a growing smile on his face. "Izuku." Todoroki started, "Thank you." And with those words, a spark lit from his red hair down to his torso, his left side in a brilliant orange flame. "Wait, I can't counter that. I mean, in theory I could if I were able to disrupt the atoms of the flames, but I don't think I have the ability to release enough charge into the—" "Shut up, you shitty nerd, and focus." Bakugo shouted from the stands, his words cutting through the tense awe the crowd watched in as his brothers muttering in the middle of a fight, clearly annoying him. Izuku jumped with a start and focused on the boy whose ice was melting off, and was, despite the situation, smiling broadly. Izuku smiled back, as he had achieved his goal. But now he would lose. Worth it, Izuku thought, charging up a large strike with his left arm. Might as well go out with a bang, pun intended, cause like thunder. Wait, did I just pun to myself? Wow, that's sad. Wait, Todoroki's doing something, I should as well. With a decent charge stored and prepared in my left arm, I held it up, prepared to fire as Todoroki mirrored the action with his left hand, charging fire instead. We locked eyes, and in silent agreement, we both fired our attacks. Lightning came out first, streaking all over the place, and Cementus had to react quickly with the dome to protect the audience. It was bright, green, and powerful, as even the small arcs that made contact with the ground or dome resulted in small cracks. The main lightning arc moved in a jagged line in the direction of Todoroki, who had started firing their flames like a flamethrower. Cementus tried putting up several barriers to block the attacks, and Midnight had started releasing her gas, but to no avail as Izuku's attack shattered the barriers. Todoroki's powerful and unruly flames simply bored straight through. The attacks met somewhere in the middle, resulting in a powerful blast that kicked up dust and left the arena in ruins. In the brief moments of collision, a large explosion of fire filled with specks of green lightning. Mirio watched in awe as the attacks hit. Despite Cementus's barrier, they still hit with extreme force, and resulted in a spectacular display of green and flames. Looking over to his friends, they had an equal expression of awe as the display died down. However, Nejire seemed incredibly restless, clearly worried about her green-haired savior, that only recently she was able to prove was real. That blow alone probably would have put any of them sufficiently out of commission. All the attacks dealt beforehand almost definitely would have made it worse, let alone the fact that Mirio and his friends were the big three, not a couple of fresh-faced juniors. What impressed Mirio most was the fact that Izuku was trying to help his opponent throughout the match, trying to save Todoroki from his self-imposed restrictions, trying to save a friend at the cost of the match. As the smoke was clearing, Midnight was able to see two figures, only one in the ring, the other flung into a wall. And the winner of the match is. Midnight began, holding Mirio and the audience in suspense, Todoroki. As she announced that the smoke finished clearing, Todoroki standing with burns on the hand of his left half, and barely held in the arena by some ice. Izuku was buried in the wall opposite him, burns up to his wrist on his left hand, both hands twitching slightly. It was clear that was his body reacting after powerful outbursts from his quirk and the burns inflicted by the final attack, clearly unconscious. The medical bots showed up to take both boys to the infirmary, Todoroki in the lead as they tried to pry the other boy out of the concrete wall. At the sight of this, Nejire suddenly shot up, and before Mirio or Tamaki could say a word, had started walking down the stairs towards the infirmary. Mirio and Tamaki glanced at each other, before rising and following the blue-haired girl. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed. If you want a next part of this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification, and also check out the other videos that I have created, and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.